Yeah, I'm good. My brain is working in overtime at the moment, that's all.
Okay.
And planning my life!
Very essential.
Oh, yeah. See.
Love music. Love life.
The Smooth Breakfast presents
Alright.
the stories, the news.
We are in
Analysis on
studio
national
silence,
current
please.
affairs.
Good morning to you once more, Lagos. You are tuned in and listening to Smooth Breakfast on Smooth 98.1 with Valentine.
And Folu?
And right now it is 7:31, which means it's time to jump inside of detailed newspaper analysis. It's freshly pressed 981. Joining us in the studio for a happy holiday Friday, we've got Nwaji. How you doing, Nwaji?
Good morning, Folu and Valentine, and good morning, Lagos.
Hey.
Good morning.
Always great to have you here. Great to hear your voice on the airwaves as always. And Nwaji is excited about this morning's stories, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Are you really though? Did I just force you into that space?
You kind of trapped me into that.
Just like
I don't have a choice, Folu. Did you really think I was going to give you any other response?
Yeah.
you're forced to concede, just like Russia in the game yesterday.
Oh, wow.
All right, Saudi Arabia. You mean in the game yesterday?
Yeah.
Yes, they.
Shout out to the Saudis.
They came respectfully. It's good.
And
It's
they
good.
left disrespectfully.
It's okay. It's still respectful because it's the host country. We can't come there and act anyhow. So just accept it.
Not in Russia. Anyway.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, so you behave.
All right. We're streaming live on YouTube as well, so you can head over to our YouTube channel right now, youtube.com/smooth981FM Lagos. Drop your comments in our live feed there. You can also drop your comments to our WhatsApp number, which is 0809 444 0981, or simply tweet at us using the hashtag freshlypressed981. Our first story this morning is talking about the army that are rather concerned about the rising cases of IED use in the southeast. Now, the Nigerian army has expressed alarm over this. They say that although the zone is one of the most peaceful among all the 6 in the country, the introduction of IEDs as a means of fighting enemies has become a source of great concern. Now, this was made known by the Deputy Director of the Army Public Relations, 82 Division of the Nigerian Army, Colonel Sajir Musa, and he made this known while speaking at a media summit by the Nigerian Union of Journalists in Owerri yesterday. Now, when we hear about the use of these improvised explosive devices and becoming more popular across the country, automatically that does make people feel a bit worried. What do you think?
Well, Folu, I think it's always important to get to the root of these issues versus looking at the symptoms. The symptoms you're having on the red actions or whatever the case may be. You're having instability and insecurity. You can connect it to the herdsman situation or just general, outburst of IPOB or whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, and that's why I really enjoyed Cheta when he gives his analysis, which goes back down to the economics of things. A lot of these individuals do not have things to do. The unemployment numbers are absolutely abysmal, which is what now creates this vacuum for people to be taken advantage of. You will always see these things happen anywhere you go. Idle hands are the devil's workshops. So when you now begin to look at the circumstances you're finding yourselves of the rise in IED, me, it's a direct correlation to the rise in unemployment. So what I would rather do is have a conversation of how best we can boost economic activities in those areas to keep these boys engaged, to prevent them from now falling within the thresholds of these individuals that are bringing these weapons of mass destructions. So these things can only happen as a result of people not having things to do.
All right.
Okay.
Nwaji, so I'm with you there all the way through to saying that when people don't have things to do, you can see it results in this sort of use. But what we're seeing here is this pointing out of a particular type of weaponry, and I think you touched on it briefly right at the end, where you say who's bringing in these weapons, and that's a matter of concern. Do you think that the army should be looking at coordinating with other security agencies?
Well, remember a couple of weeks ago we ran into a story where there was a particular raid on a convoy that was tipped off by some individuals who noticed some lorries moving around. I'm not sure what part of the country that was, and the army were notified and they raided the building to seize the weapons. So proliferations of weapons is going to happen, especially in Nigeria in a pre-election year for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So that is going to happen. So the army need to be more cognizant about it. People need to pay more attention to it and begin to make noise about it. But at the same time, once again, these things exist because of the vacuum, like I said earlier, of economic activity. So it's a combination of a lot of things that are going on at the same time. This just happens to be the tip of the iceberg that we can only see. We need to dig down deep to now get to the root of it. Now, these weapons moving up and down I don't know why you would need IEDs for anything. We're not in a war zone. We're not fighting, significant battles.
That's what's concerning.
Yeah,
Who's
so-
spreading the knowledge? Who's training? Because there must be a level of because for the knowledge to spread, right? It must be happening in very specific ways.
It is, and Fulu, this issue has kind of been with us for quite a while since the war. It goes
Okay.
back 50 years. It's not anything new. So since we've
Okay.
had the introductions of that level of sophisticated weaponry in Nigeria, you've kind of had times and ebbs and flows within the Nigerian history where these weapons just happen to keep resurfacing. People from Eastern Europe or Southern Africa, South Africa bring these things in. They trade. People in politics use them, whatever the case may be. It's a terrible situation.
It is
so,
terrible.
So for me, it's a combination of the military taking action in conjunction with other law enforcement agencies, and also people pointing out things that they see to seize it, and also at the same time boosting economic activity, so that way it doesn't now fall into the hands of inactive individuals who have nothing else to do.
All right. So more information sharing and more job creation, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
But speaking of job creation, this next headline suggests that maybe some people could lose their jobs. The reason I say that is because the Guardian newspaper tells us this story. The NCAA are to review planes requirement for commercial airlines. So that's the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority. They're reviewing the provision of the Nigerian Civil Aviation Regulation, granting of air operating certificates to commercial airlines. All right, so commercial airlines specifically. Now, this is the apex regulatory body for the industry, and it said that the move was in respect of challenges of maintaining efficient services and routine maintenance schedule. However, stakeholders are. Well, let's go into the details of the story. What are your thoughts on this, first of all?
You see, I'm a little bit conflicted because, what is an efficient service and what is an efficient maintenance schedule? If you only have a few planes across, you're within the purview of your fleet as an airline, and you are expected to traverse the entire traffic of this country back and forth in any given day, you are going to have challenges with services. That's why we see delays. That's why when they talk about delays, we're referring to maintaining schedules. You're talking about flying within the air. You cannot take any risks. We have had disastrous situations in this country before. So no airline wants to put a bird up in the sky that should not be flying. It's just literally that simple.
Yeah.
So therefore, if there are any mechanical issues, that plane is not going to fly, and then you have to wait for another airline to be available, which now has a knock-on effect on your schedule, etc., etc. So I think for me, this is applaudable and I enjoy it. But if you go within the article, a lot of people argue about capacity, that to have more than two is an economic burden because we have to go to the capital markets or to private investors to raise the money to be able to now have a fleet of 10 to 20, I think.
Yes, which is what is being.
You and I talked earlier before we came on air about how if you can just focus on a regional situation.
Right.
So if you were just focusing on the Northeast, for example, or the Southeast, and then that would now permit you to have maybe 2 to 3 to 4 serviceable aircrafts that can be in the air at any given time. The challenge you have now is that with all these operators, they want to pretty much operate from Lagos, operate from Abuja, operate from Port Harcourt, and then just go from wherever that is. And that now puts a stress on your operations, just given the amount of money you have to spend to keep these services operational.
Well, Nwaji, a lot of some people might also say that what we're seeing in our aviation industry is a result of what exists within Nigerian, almost like the structure of how we operate as a business.
Exactly.
A lot of things tend to be concentrated in the center. There tends to be one center. But you do make a very valid point about the safety of these aircraft. And a number of customers of different airlines have lamented or be concerned when the plane that's just brought people, it stays and it's been doing this particular shuttle, and it's that same plane that's been operating all the same too.
Service, basically.
Absolutely. So while we can understand the financial burden and the concern, doesn't that weigh out?
That
a
is
little
number
more?
one, and that's pretty much where the regulators, NCAA, are coming from, is with regards to just the safety component, which cannot be argued. But at the same time, that has to be done within context. If and that's why you can't just create policies without thinking things properly through. I appreciate that safety is first, but in addition to safety, let's look at some capacity development programs or how best we can boost investment into these areas so that we can have more players, how best we can regionalize a lot of these airlines as well to reduce the cost of operations of flying up and down, because Nigeria is a pretty big country, it's not small. I mean, if you're going to go to like anywhere in the Northeast, you have to fly to Abuja, which is an hour, then you have to do like another 45 minutes to an hour to those regions. It's quite extensive if you're just flying, and it's not something that we should just play around with.
Indeed, I would love to know Lagos, the rest of Nigeria. I know people are listening to us from as far as KD. A big shout out to our KD listener who tweeted at us early this morning. Do let us know what your thoughts are. How do we regionalize things to move more in that area? Because I guess the biggest disadvantage or the reason why a lot of people would say maybe the air industries have not yet regionalized is the cost of air travel vis-a-vis the cost of road travel. But again, that's a business discussion.
Oh yeah, and I can go into it and break down the numbers for you very quickly.
We saw what Southwest did in America,
There's
so I do
many
understand.
airlines, yeah.
I do understand that.
Yeah,
all right, let's keep it moving. Up next, still from the Guardian newspaper, the Senate declares Samsung MD an illegal immigrant and orders his immediate deportation. Now, if this headline doesn't raise eyebrows, I don't know what will really. So this happened yesterday, where the Senate declared the Samsung managing director Young Hojo an illegal immigrant. It also ordered the Nigerian Immigration Service to deport Hojo back to South Korea, his home country. Now, all of this came about through interesting means, and I would love to almost dig a little bit more into this story later on and see what we can get out of it. But there was an ad hoc committee that was set up to probe a $16.35 billion Enigma oil field project, which was chaired by Senator Solomon Adeola, representing Lagos West senatorial district. And it was in this investigation that they suddenly discovered he couldn't provide some papers, and they said, well, you're here illegally. What are your thoughts on this story, Nwaji?
Well, first and foremost, I'm sick and tired of the Senate now coming up as the police of and there's a subsequent article later on this morning that we're going to talk about the extent to which the Senate believe that they can just operate and declare things. You are the legislative body of Nigeria. You are not the judiciary. You are not the police. You are not the Nigerian Immigration Services. You have agencies that handle these jobs. This man is in this country. He is registered with a company that is registered. He's working for a company that is registered in Nigeria. So if you are declaring him an illegal immigrant, you need to look at the paperwork that was submitted by those organizations for him to come here. He must have flown in through the airport. I don't think he drove here from South Korea. He must have, his passport must have been stamped. He must have got a visa. Let's look at these things before you now start declaring that the paperwork was illegal, etc., etc., etc. It's really, really annoying. And it's even further annoying when it's linked to something that has to do with money. Okay, so clearly you can make assumptions. Obviously, I don't know. Like Folu, you said, we need to dig deep into the story.
It's a GINA project.
But when you link a project of this magnitude and then something didn't happen, and you say, oh, okay, well, by the way, you just happen to be here legally. I mean, come on, man. I mean, it just makes it look fishy, and it just makes you just lose credibility with regards to what you're saying, because people can assume, okay, is it because money didn't exchange hands, or you weren't greaseball, so that's why you're not coming down on me? I mean, there's so many ways you can look at this, and that's what happens. You open the door to these criticisms when you do not address things properly, and you start operating out of your remit. So the Senate needs to just be very careful and just focus on what they do, which is creating laws to govern Nigeria.
I mean, it's very interesting you mentioned that, because a few things that Nigeria you may want to know is that this Egina oil field project is considered to be one of the largest investment projects in the Nigerian oil and gas sector at the moment. And it is a huge one. And it was found, according again to this story, that the South Korean, while in Nigeria, they say violated the local content, spending $1.6 billion out of the $3.5 billion concern got from, they spent it in South Korea. So again, it comes down to money.
I rest my case. Thank you for that.
Let's keep it moving. The next story now is still dealing in Asian news, almost in Nigeria. We are becoming one after all. It's a currency swap. So the CBN is to incentivize importers who tender the Chinese Renminbi. So following the $2.5 billion bilateral currency swap agreement that was signed last month between the Central Bank of Nigeria and the People's Bank of China, the CBN has now said that it will incentivize importers and traders who tender their invoices in renminbi. All right. Your thoughts?
As a stone cold capitalist, I absolutely love this. And I love it because we need to move away from this dependency on the US dollar.
Yes.
We need to have some kind of diversification with regards to the access that we have, the access to cash and capital to be allowed us to conduct business. RMB, otherwise known as my Igbo brothers will say the Chinese dollar, has been around for quite a while. A lot of people have been used, etc. And then you will now travel to China or Taiwan and then now convert it to local currency to do business. But now with these bilateral relationships we're having with China, you can have access at a much mean. It means that you will take less naira to the bank to get pretty much the same value in Chinese currency, which allows you to trade.
And of course, we see we'll then see. Does that mean we'll then see a knock-on effect for traders? Well, definitely large-scale traders, perhaps smaller-scale traders, perhaps people who are just saying, "Listen, I've got this small business. I want to go do stuff in China."
So there are multiple knock-on effects. The first
Okay.
is what you're referring to, so that it gives people more access to foreign currency to be able to trade, to be able to import products, etc. From
Okay.
the effect of that is because our current reserves, because we generate oil revenues in US dollars,
Yes.
is that it puts less stress on our reserves.
Okay,
That's
so it's less risk for us.
So it's less
in a
risk
way.
for us. And the number two, it creates less demand for US dollars, which is what our reserves are pegged to. So that way, once you have less demand, you now see a knock-on effect on the currency exchange of the naira getting stronger. So you now see a depreciation of the dollar to naira conversion rate. So these are just beautiful economic things that
That'd be
begin
really
to
nice.
happen. And if it does happen and people get, and it's just a psychological thing that people have to get used to, and that's why I really, really enjoy this. And once people begin to know that, look, we have options, we don't necessarily have to go to buy dollar for every single thing. So if you, for example, you want to buy the RM, now want to use it to exchange into euros, exchange of money and exchange of currencies. So I fully welcome it. It's very exciting, and I hope it works.
Thank you very
Lovely.
much, Nwaji.
We have a message from Ika on WhatsApp. He says, "See, I don't appreciate when there's an extra planes are open up in black and white. There's a particular airline we call Molwe. Why? Because they've never their planes can. The vibration on Ghana is not in Port Harcourt. They told us our plane is coming from Lagos, and that's after 2 hours of delay. Guess what? That plane coming from Lagos to pick us from Port Harcourt was actually coming from Abuja. Then we'll land in Lagos to load new passengers before coming to Port Harcourt. I was like, Kilo day, one for a plane, if I said it well. But only one plane was operating that day. On my way back to Lagos, I was just praying. I've never prayed like that before in my life. The point is, the Nigerian aviation sector is rubbish. One man makes big and then company. Yinka, thank you very much for that message. Keep yours coming in on 0809 440 981. Our next story is from the Thisday newspaper. So the United States Korean consortium invested in 1,185 megawatts Ebonyi power project. So this power project by the end. So the way they're sharing this investment project really is 80% goes to the company Hodges and Bakersfield Limited and 20% borne by the Ebonyi state government. Waji.
Well, big example to answer your question about highs.
Okay.
So here
okay.
you have a state entity now partnering with a consortium to now begin to create power within a particular region, Ebonyi State. So I mean, they're doing it through an equity have more of
Within the states.
within the states and within regions. One generate more power. It cannot always come from the center. It just
Okay.
can't. It's not sustainable. So credit to Ebonyi State for being a pioneer and leading this thing. Can you imagine if we had all 36 states on an average go into some kind of arrangement like this, even if they're not necessarily generating as high as 4.185 megawatts, but someone with they're going to have an additional 50 to 100 megawatts addition into the country in itself, which is quite significant when you now begin to think of what our requirements are to have 24-hour power. So I think these kind of things should be highly encouraged so that we can see more power generation in the country.
Yeah.
But then, Nwaji, how do you sort of deal with the concern for a lot of business investors as to the likelihood of states executing the projects appropriately or doing their part? Stories in the past in Nigeria and in the present today, where there are complaints that, well, the states they haven't done their work, they haven't followed through, they haven't allowed the business or the process to simply flow.
Well, that's where NERC comes in, the Nigerian Electricity
Electricity
Regulatory Commission. So they have to make sure that they're also part of this arrangement to begin to see what the service level agreement is between the states and companies, for example. So that way you have to just make sure you have a quality assurance check of all the different things that everybody needs to do before these things now kick off. So it's not just for the states to now gloriously come out. No, let's do a proper due diligence and make sure that everything is in place, that everybody's going to behave themselves. If you as a state are saying you're going to do X, can we have a checklist of all the things that you're going to do, and can we check that you're going to do those things? You as a private company that's working with the state, what is the checklist of things you need to do? Can we check that you're going to do those things? So if these things are properly managed for you, they can be accomplished. It's just everybody has to work together to get it done.
Thank you very much, Waji. Next story is from the Daily Times newspaper. So, National Assembly lacks power to probe criminal allegations. That's what the court says. The Federal High Court in Abuja precisely held that the National Assembly lacks the powers to investigate criminal allegations or indict anybody based on its criminal investigation. And this was a judgment that was delivered on June 12, 2018 by Justice Gabriel Kolawole. And that suit, it was filed by Mr. Festus Keyamo against the House of Representatives and 2 others. What's your take on this?
Well, this goes back to what we talked about earlier with regards to the extent with which the National Assembly, Senate, and everybody else believes that they can just criminalize individuals based on their own findings or whatever the case may be. One thing we have to remember that we are in a constitutional democracy, okay? And we have 3 separate powers. You have the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. Regardless of what anybody thinks, that is the state of the country that we are in. So you have to allow those separations for powers to execute their duties properly. You as a Senate, through your probes and your committees and your findings, may be able to bring out certain things, but you need to hand over those results to the powers that are in place to try people for criminal activities. You as a body, a Senate or an Assembly, do not constitutionally or legally have the right to do that. It is literally that simple. I don't know how else to say it. I don't know if I need to say it in Yoruba, in Pidgin, or in my native Igbo. I don't know. But frankly speaking, it is literally that simple. And I don't know why we get confused about these things. We just need to look and understand the country that we are in. I think for me, this is a fallout and a legacy of our military past, where we felt that people had absolute powers. But as we all know, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So we need to just focus. Allow the powers that are in place to try people for legal issues. Okay. If it's not within your remit, don't go there. Fully, you're smiling because you're a lawyer.
Because I was going to direct a question to both of you.
Yeah.
Because if individuals like Mr. Festus Keyamo does not take the National Assembly to court on certain issues like this, who checks them then?
Nobody. That's the point.
That's it. That's what she is. We've got messages coming through up on our live feed. Hello, Chukuma Moma. I always love seeing you up there. He says, please let the Senate handle other issues. It's really annoying. They're not in charge of immigrants. Face your other issues, please. That's going back to them declaring the Samsung MD as an illegal immigrant. While Big T up on WhatsApp says, the dollar was exchanging at 60 kobo to $1 when I was younger. My first plane ticket to the US was 150 naira. With this currency conversion rate, I pray that the naira gets stronger so that my kids can enjoy what I did.
Amen.
60 kobo to the dollar. Interesting.
Yeah.
Not
like 1964 or something.
So Biggie from K2 says, I've not seen anyone deported from this country as an illegal immigrant. Our country, our neighboring countries enter, stay in our country anyhow with no validation and registration. I'm finally happy some sense has been called on the government for the naira yuan swap. Let's stop depending on the dollar and move with other currency.
Well said.
Biggie, they have deported a lot of people. Trust me. Most deaths, DJ was deported at the point of entry. I'm sure he just gave somebody too much lip. They're like, yeah, bye. We've got more still. Shegun on WhatsApp says, those electricity investors must remember to sort out our senators, or else they too could be declared illegal immigrants. That is Shegun's opinion. It is not the official opinion of Smooth. Let's carry on with our stories.
Our next story from Thisday newspaper. Stop glorifying thieves. Treats them with ignominy, Buhari tells Nigerians. Now, in a Salah message that he delivered to Muslims in commemoration of the end of Ramadan, the President, Muhammadu Buhari, yesterday in Abuja admonished Nigerians to put pay to the attitude of celebrating corrupt people in the country. In this same story, he talks about the investigation of violence and conflict in certain parts of the country and urged citizens to forgive one another and embrace peace. Some other members of the leadership, including the Vice President, the former Vice President, the Senate President, are also putting their voice to this. What's your take?
Well, I mean, I'm not surprised that this is actually coming from Buhari with regards to his entire lifetime of trying to fight corruption and everything else. But this, for me, it's a very, very interesting story. Why? I always talk about you get the leadership you deserve. Okay. One thing that Nigerians love to do is we love to complain about government, we love to complain about our leaders, but we never ever look at the man in the mirror. And what do I mean by that? People that are into corrupt practices in government. Okay. Oftentimes these are your friends, accomplices, colleagues, or just people you happen to have associations with. You are very aware of it. Somebody's daughter gets married, somebody's son gets married. You go and participate in that wedding. Somebody's celebrating a 50th birthday party. You go and celebrate in that particular party. So what the president is saying here is that stop glorifying these individuals. whether or not you know them, but you joining in these celebrations and associations with these individuals, as opposed to shunning them and calling them out for what they are, is actually part of our problem. And that's where the root of this issue is coming from. It's with regards to how we begin to see life. If we know individuals are into corrupt practices, then we need to ensure that we do not glorify them. Okay? Even if you don't necessarily want to come out and call them what they are, but at the minimum, do not partake and participate in that which they do illegally. That's the point of this entire message that the president has been trying to say. And frankly speaking, he's been saying it for the last 33 years.
Yes.
Okay? And that is his entire point, is that you cannot expect any kind of sanity or cleanup with regards to corruption if Nigerians themselves continue to patronize individuals that are stealing. And it's literally just that simple. So it's a message that Nigerians need to take very seriously. It's a huge introspection and some self-checking that we need to do about ourselves. We can complain about leadership from now till tomorrow, but you have got to be the change that you want to see. You get the leadership that you deserve. If you now stand on a formidable ground of high morality, you will eventually have high morality leaders. So it's a very important message for us.
Well said, Nwaji. Well said. So I think some 2 weeks ago, we had a conversation on Lagos Talks 91 where we carried out a little social experiment and asked Nigerians to let us know if they found that a family member was corrupt or stole money, when they called them out.
And a lot of
And
people
it just shows how many citizens really do not care.
they don't.
about
So
this thing.
but see, my whole thing is, so don't be shocked with that kind of attitude when you have the kind of situations that we have, when you have airlines that are not serviceable, when you have power generation that is a problem, when you have bad infrastructure and interstate connectivity roads that do not work, when you have lack of security. I can list a litany of issues that we have. So my whole thing is, do not be surprised when you have that attitude of, oh, if my family's in government and they chop money, I'm not going to say anything. Really, man? Come on, bro.
A few messages have come through very quickly. Ayo from Ajao Estate says on WhatsApp, fly local in Nigeria? Not until a very hot place freezes over. What with all the overaged, overused and dilapidated flying coffins? Not unless you knock me and carry me aboard. Anything else could work. And as for the senators declaring someone an illegal immigrant, the guy or his company have obviously not agreed to settle them. It's that simple, says
I
Ayo.
wasn't going to say it, but Ayo said it.
That's what Ayo said. And Yinka came back to say somebody got married into Mr. Indimi's family, or is it vice versa? See, this table president is shaking, eh? There are a lot of people on top. And to be fair, somebody once said to me, there is no wealth in Nigeria that was created without a great crime behind it. And this was pointed directly in reference to MK Abiola, actually. So consider that. I know it is a shaky table. But let's carry on.
But it's true.
Yeah, wobbly table. Now, our final story from the Daily Times newspaper. The Nigerian police force on Thursday presented checks cumulatively is worth 29.836 million naira to 51 families of police officers who lost their lives in the line of duty. In addition to this, the Inspector General of Police have actually said that, well, first of all, that the beneficiaries cut across the Federal Capital Territory in Niger State, Kaduna, which make up the zone that they're concentrating on. They said they're going to extend to other parts of the country. Nwaji, what's your thought?
Well, first and foremost, my heart goes out to the families of these fallen individuals who died in the line of duty. Very important to honor them, and very, very important to make sure that there are compensations in place for their families, especially with families that have to look after younger ones, etc., etc. So that 21 million naira comes to about, 29 million naira comes to about 568,000 per family. So it's a good way to spread the money across, and we need to see more structured ways of doing this. So that way, if your family member dies in the line of duty, you know that something will be coming to you to allow you to continue your sustenance or whatever.
Indeed.
Beautiful.
Thank you so very much for that, Nwaji. On that note, we are done. I'll round up with Olatupostu's message, who says, if Nigeria were to be a sane society, having sane legislature, none of these present senators would have been qualified to sit their collective behinds on those hallowed chairs.
Collective behind.
Yes, he used less polite language, but I edited that for our sake. Coming up next, though, we'll be talking sports, actually, inside the locker room at 8:15. Very exciting time with Tega. Stay with us. Nwaji, thank you very much.
Thank
you can
you,
find
Nwaji.
him online at the corporate MC with a K. That's on Twitter and on Instagram. Keep listening to Smooth.
The headlines.
Nwaji, you killed it.
I did.
Yes.